Hey everyone, Urban Fish Keeper here. I hope you're all keeping well and keeping safe. It's been an interesting week for the Urban Fish Keeper. Today I'm just gonna have a bit of a chat about a couple of things, and I'm gonna run you through as well some ram breeding. But I think this happens to a lot of breeders at some stage, where you try different things, you've got limited space as we have here. You've only got X amount of aquariums you can use, and then all of a sudden it just kicks off, and stuff that you've been struggling to breed just starts breeding, and you start running out of space, and you need to start moving things around. And that's where I am at the moment. This week that's just passed has been an interesting week from a breeding point of view, and I'll share some of that with you. Before I get started, I first of all want to say a massive thank you to the subscribers. I've been fortunate. I hit 500 subscribers this week. I didn't think we would even get to 500, but it's really encouraging, and it makes me want to make more and more of these and do some more DIY and more builds and that kind of thing, and share more information. So a big shout out to one of our fellow breeders in the UK who became subscriber number 500. So thank you very much for that. The other thing as well is I just want to quickly just address a comment that was made in one of the groups around my Apisto breeding. So my last video I did on Apistogramma Hongsley, and I spoke about how I breed those, or how I've successfully bred those, and in particular using these aquarium, the 20-litre aquarium from Kmart. And the comment that was made is, for somebody that's maybe inexperienced or even experienced, 20 litres is definitely not the recommended size that I should be using to breed Apistos in. Now, I'll start by saying I agree. I think we all know, any of us that breed know that wherever possible, you try and have the biggest possible aquarium. So if I didn't have space issues and I can breed whatever, I had no limits on the size of the aquariums I could keep, I would probably breed Apistos in the standard 2-foot aquarium. That's what I'd probably use. But what this channel is really about is saying, you know what, I have limited space. What can I keep in that limited space, and what can I successfully breed when my aquariums are smaller? And if they are smaller, what are those challenges that I may face in trying to breed? And it's about me trying to say to people, when you don't have the space and you've got a small rack, a rack like I've got behind me, how can you breed some of those more tricky or difficult stuff and using smaller aquariums? So that's what it's about. I'm not abdicating in any way, and I'm also not saying in any way that, you have to use a small aquarium to breed it. No, I'm saying, hey, it can be done in a 20-litre aquarium. This is how I've done it successfully. It is possible, and these are the things that you need to consider when doing it. So yes, to those comments that were made in the one group around the size, I agree. If you can go bigger, but the reality is it can be done in a 20-litre. And I will add, when I get to the rams, I actually think a smaller aquarium is a better choice for breeding rams when you have a big spawn, and I'll go into the details around that. Before I get onto the ram breeding, I just want to talk about some of the challenges I've currently got in this room. So one of the challenges I have is in this aquarium right up at the top. You probably can't see it in the camera, but that's where I spawned my Bettas imbellis. So that's the wild, one of the wild Bettas. And I had a really good spawning, and they're getting to the stage now where I really need to move them out of the 20-litre. And when I spawn in the 20-litre for Bettas, and you would have seen from one of my previous videos, is that I don't fill the aquarium to the top. So, that's probably only about 15 litres of water. They're doing very well. But if you have a look here, as you can see, there is a fair amount of baby imbellis in this aquarium. Now, they're going through an unbelievable amount of baby brine shrimp twice a day. But they're getting to the stage now where I need to move them into a bigger aquarium. Now, for all intents and purposes, that's not an issue if I didn't have a lot of other things breeding at the moment. So I'm having, I'm trying to figure out where to move them, and they'll shortly be moved. So that's one of the challenges that I've got. The other challenge that I've got at the moment is that in this tank behind me, this one here, that was my rearing tank for my blue-black rams. And as you would have heard me in some of my previous videos, my blue-black, when I spawned them the first time, the male passed away, and I then pulled the fry from them. Then there was about 8, 9 fry. I raised them to a certain stage in a Zeiss little breeder box, and from there I moved them into the 64-litre cubes. Now, while they've been being raised in there, and they're not big at all, a pair's decided to spawn in there, which has meant that I've had to move the other ones out, and I now have a 64-litre aquarium with one tiny pair of rams and a spawn. Now, as you know, I prefer to leave the fry with the parents, but in this case, there's one or two things here. I'm either going to have to leave it with the parents, and my gut feel is that they probably won't do really well in that size aquarium. I think it's too big for them to get to the food they need. And because it's a rearing aquarium, it's not covered in plants, and there would have been no infusorian numbers or anything in that aquarium. So I am feeding them at the moment, and I'll go through the ram feeding when I go through the breeding of the rams. So that's my one challenge. And if you have a look here, you can see, the dad has actually turned out really well. He's quite dark in color, which is what I was trying to get out. So this is the blue-black rams. So he's really dark, and you can see they've got a really nice little spawn. Mom and dad have been really good, but I really didn't expect them to spawn at such a young age. So that's one of the other challenges. What do I do then? Where do I move it? And I need to figure that out over the next day or two. The other challenge that I have is that, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today, is my gold rams. So the gold rams is an interesting one, and I'll go through the breeding of the gold rams in particular, as where, how I've struggled to try and get them to spawn. But in the 20, they've spawned. That's them up here. And if you have a look at this footage, you'll see that it's not a small spawn, and both mom and dad are being very good parents, and it's a really fair size spawn. So they're okay in this aquarium for a while, definitely for a few weeks, no problem. But then again, I'm going to have to move those fry out somewhere when they get a little bit bigger, and where am I going to go with them? Space, tanks, I'm limited to the rearing tanks that I've got available. I've still got, all the discus babies behind me. Those have to move. I need to start selling them and start getting them out, or giving them away, or doing whatever. The same with the parents behind me. You probably can't see because I'm sitting in front of their tank, but they've got some wrigglers there at the moment, so we'll see how that goes. Their behavior recently has been very strange. They've spawned, no problem. The fry have become free swimming, no problem. The fry, I think, have been a little bit weak because the fry haven't seemed as strong as previous spawns. I've only had maybe 10 or 15 attached to the parents, and then after about a day or two, the parents just go, no, stuff this, we're spawning again, and then they just eat the fry that's been attached to them. So that's been interesting, and I'll just keep an eye on them. But again, we need that tank space. This pair has to go. In my main aquarium in the house, which I haven't shown you yet, and I will at some stage, I've just got some discus in there, and what has happened as well over this week, 2 pairs are formed, and they're spawning on either side of the aquarium, but I can't pull those pairs out and let them spawn in one of these aquariums. I just don't have space. And they've actually got, the one pair's got the babies to wrigglers, and then in an aquarium with a whole lot of other discus, that's not going to last very long. So I've got that challenge, and I need to either move them on or do something there. Not too sure what to do there. The last one that I've got is that the Bettas that I've bred are now, getting to the age where they need to be moved on. So if you have a look at this footage, you'll see, there's a fair amount of Bettas in this aquarium, and they're doing exceptionally well. They really are. And I've really enjoyed breeding them. Although right now I've stopped breeding Bettas because I just don't have space to breed anything more. So that's the other challenge is, I need to move those on. Where do I go with them? And then I've also still got some projects in the background that I want to work on, that I want to share with you guys. So I've got some challenges in the fish room at the moment, but you know what? They're good challenges. They're, fish are breeding. They're being, we're successfully getting the results we want. It's now just a question of, finding what to do with what I've bred. And to be quite honest, I'll try and sell some of it. If I don't sell, I'll give it away. The challenge is always when giving away, who do you give it to? I'd like, a lot of the time I'd like to give to people, trying new, wanting to give the hobby a go and give them some fish and say, yeah, keep a couple of Bettas, see how it goes. You want to try discus while you're too young discus, make sure your setup is right, give it a go, see how it goes. But it's difficult to decide who you just give to, because, there'll be people out there that'll just want for the sake of wanting, because they, can possibly make some money on it or sell it afterwards. But, those are the challenges I have, and that's what I'll deal with. Right, so let's get to ram breeding. And the only reason I'm going to talk about ram breeding is because my rams are breeding at the moment. So what have I done to successfully breed rams? Right, I'm not going to go through the whole setup of the 20-litre aquarium because I've done that in the Aposto setup. But just briefly, 20-litre Kmart aquarium I use in where the golds have spawned. I've used the Matin filter system. And you can go and have a look at that video on how to make the Matin filter. So in the 20s, on the shelf, that's the filtration. For the blue-black rams, they've just got the normal biochemical, just the normal sponge filters is what's in there. Nothing fancy, just sponge filters, 2 of those in that aquarium, and then 1 in front that I use for putting water into a dish if I float anything in there. So from an aquarium setup, there's the blue-black rams have bred in this aquarium, which is a 64, and I'll talk about the problems around that. And then the gold rams have bred in the 20. Now, water conditions, because I've had some questions around water, what is my pH, etc. So, the pH for these aquariums, so the pH for where the rams are breeding at the moment, is sitting at 6.8. And I checked that this morning. Temperature on the aquariums is sitting at 28 degrees. And TDS, total dissolved solids, is sitting at 155 on both aquariums. This one I think is this one's a little bit low, I think 145. This one with the golds is 155. The other question I was asked, do I use RO water? I do have an RO system, but I don't use any RO water for my breeding. It's my last resort. The only place I've used a bit of RO water is in one of my shrimp tanks, which I haven't shared yet, but I'll share that. That's part of another project that I'm working on. The challenge for me with RO water is that when I do water changes, I need to make sure I get all the ratios and everything right. Otherwise, there's too much of a fluctuation. So where possible, I try and keep it as simple as possible. As you know, I like to use aged water, 24 hours or more that it's been standing in a bucket. And that's what I use for my water changes. Right, so let's just talk about the breeding of the gold rams. Now, the gold rams have been a challenge for me because I haven't been able to spawn them for a while. I've really tried. And the female in particular has been in so many different aquariums because at one stage I was just, no, I'm not even going to bother anymore. And my son said to me, no, don't give up. You need to get them to spawn. Give it a go. At one stage I thought, well, maybe the 20-litre is a factor here and is causing a bit of an issue. Maybe I need to move them to a bigger. So I actually had the blue-black rams in 100-litre, not the blue-black, sorry, the golds in a 100-litre cube aquarium. And I could not get them to spawn in a 100-litre cube aquarium no matter what I tried. I've also had them in the 20-litre aquariums for a while and I couldn't get them to spawn. The only thing I did differently is I moved them from the 100-litre back into the 20-litre aquarium, and I took a whole handful of floating plants. When I a whole handful, I'm talking about a massive bunch of floating plants. And I just dumped that in the top of the aquarium. What it did though is it created in the back left corner of this aquarium, it actually created a very dark secluded spot because of all this floating plants on top. There's wood going across the front, there's a flower pot on the right hand side, and in that corner was this very secluded spot. It wasn't even 2 days after I put in all those floating plants and created, in my opinion, almost a claustrophobic type of aquarium, that bang, they spawned. Now, whether that was the trigger or not, I don't know, but that seemed to bring on the spawning. So they've had it's a really good spawn, as you would have seen in the footage, and we're now on about day 3, and the fry are doing very well. The blue black rams, on the other hand, very young pair. They're in this 64 litre down here. Spawned. I moved out all their siblings to another aquarium because they were obviously chasing them and bullying them. And their fry is really tiny. Ideally, I should be moving them out, but I'm not going to. I'm leaving it there because at the moment space is a challenge for me. And where do I move them and try and raise them, and then where do I go with that? The other thing is I didn't expect them to breed at that small size. But the challenge in an aquarium this size, when you're breeding rams and you take on the same philosophy as what I do, is that says, well, let the parents raise the babies wherever possible, is in such a big aquarium, when feeding that fry, the food disbursement in a big aquarium is, the fry probably only have, not a couple of seconds, but maybe 10, 15 seconds where the food is around them before it starts moving around in the aquarium, and they lose that. As we're in the 20 litres, when I put food in the 20 litres and I put it all the way along the front, and it starts working its way down, that cloud of food is there for a fair amount of time and allows the fry to get that food. So as much as people may say that the 20 litre is far too small and you shouldn't be breeding maybe some of the dwarf cichlids in an aquarium that size, if the aquarium is well matured and you've got plenty of hiding spaces, as I've spoken about before, that if there's any bullying or anything happening, the female or the male can get away. In my opinion, there's the benefit of being able to feed a whole group of those babies in a small aquarium where the food is not being dispersed through a massive water volume, I think works really well, and is part of why the success rate on raising some of the fry is probably higher than what it will be in one of these aquariums. Now, when it comes to fry foods and for breeding the ram, so let me backtrack, because for those of you that haven't watched my previous videos, you want to know, okay, so what has he done? In the aquarium, if you're breeding in a 20, gravel at the bottom, the filtration I've been through, temperature, I've told you 28 degrees, pH at the moment running at 6.8 and TDS at about 155. So that's the aquarium, and that's the setup. The one for the black rams, because it's a rearing tank, no substrate and sponge filters. Once they've spawned, ideally what you want is, once they're free swimming, like this group is now here, this group, the little ones are down at the bottom here and very difficult to see, but you could see it on the video that I've added in. The challenge is, if you don't have Infusoria culture ready to go, you need to use something like egg. Now, I've watched a lot of people use egg, and some people use it very successfully on their dwarfs. For me, it has to be really fine, and it almost needs to be like a powder in the water, like really, you don't necessarily want to see the particles. So I want to just share with you the method that I use, and it's a method that I've used for many years. So what I do is I just take a piece of black material. Okay, the color of the material doesn't matter. It's just a piece of fine material. Then in the center of the material, I wanted to show you this without dropping it. In the center of the material, I just put a little blob of egg. Okay, just have a little blob of egg, and that's boiled egg. The cloth has been, the material's been wet. Then I just fold it up, and the egg is now sitting in the bottom in that little, just fold it up. And I'm using a glass. I would normally just do this in a bowl, but I just want to show you. I then put that in the water, and I start squeezing. Now, I don't know if you can see clearly, but it starts creating like almost like a white chalkiness in the water. And that's what I do. And that creates an incredibly fine, almost egg solution or egg food in the water. Okay, and I just keep doing that for a while. And that then becomes that food that I'm giving for the first few days. And you can see it's gone all like milky. And that's fine little egg particles in there. Now, in the smaller 20 aquarium, it's easy to feed it. You take a pipette, you fill the pipette, and you just run it on the inside of the glass. You just run the food, the mixture down the glass. You do that a couple of times, and when it hits the surface, it creates this fine little cloud that starts moving through the water column, and they eat from that. In bigger aquariums, it's a challenge, because if you do that at the top of the surface of the water for your rams, by the time it gets 25% down your aquarium, it's all dispersed in the water and it's never going to get to them. So what I use for that is, I get some airline tubing, and to the end of the airline tubing, I just connect a piece of acrylic pipe. Okay? And you can use whatever pipe you want to use. This I think is a 5mm pipe, if I remember correctly. And it's a clear one. But if you could get something thin like this and a nice length, this is about a 30 centimeter length, I connect that to the airline tubing. What I then do is, and I'll just show you quickly, there's some of the babies down at the bottom here, or the fry. I then fill this pipe with the egg mixture. And I gently blow it out just above where the fry is, so that I know that egg cloud is being dispersed where they are. All right, so that's how I feed in the bigger aquariums. That's how I feed the egg mix. Now, you need the egg mix or infusoria right in the beginning with rams, unless you're in an aquarium that's got a lot of plants and you're comfortable. There'll be infusoria swimming around in there, which in that aquarium there would have been, and that would have helped them for that first day. But they still get egg, and then combined with that, I also feed vinegar eel at the moment. So they're getting vinegar eel. These are still really tiny. They get one squirt. The blue blacks are really tiny, so they get one squirt of vinegar eel and the egg. And the golds get probably 2 squirts of vinegar eel and the egg. Now, the method to feed the vinegar eel to the blue blacks, because of the size of the aquarium, same method. I use this method. For the top one, I use, for the golds, I use the pipette, and I just run it down the front of the glass. Now, what you can see in my first foods video, I would have spoken about vinegar eel and how I run multiples. You can see in here what I've done is I've put a piece of cotton wool in the neck, right? And then the cotton wool goes in to where it touches the vinegar solution. It has to be in the vinegar solution, and then above the cotton wool I put fresh water. And what happens is the vinegar eels will work their way through the cotton wool to get to the fresh air, or to get to the air, and then they're in the fresh water. And then it's easy for me just to siphon them out and feed them as I require. All right, so that's around the feeding. What I started to do yesterday already with the golds is newly hatched brine, just a little squirt of newly hatched brine in there, just to see if they're starting to chase it. Some of them are, and I actually saw yesterday there was there's probably 10 or 15 of them that I could see had little pink bellies already. So I'll continue with them, a little bit of egg, definitely the vinegar eel, a little bit of brine shrimp, as well as some micro worm in between it. The blue blacks, on the other hand, I've put some egg in there now for them. I'll keep giving them, and see how it goes. But in that size aquarium, I don't think they're going to get the kind of food that they need to get adequately. So I either need to move them out or leave them, because the parents are young, and move those parents into their own aquarium once we see what happens to that spawn. All right, so that's around the breeding of the rams. The rams, from the parents, from a food, getting them ready to spawn, or just their feeding. What do I feed? So again, it's the same as what I've shared with you before. The primary food is frozen brine shrimp, occasionally freeze-dried bloodworm, occasionally freeze-dried blackworm, and occasionally frozen bloodworm. And I also do give a little bit of dry food every now and then, but again, it's occasionally. Primary food for them is frozen brine shrimp. All right, so that's around the breeding of the rams. I hope that answers some questions that people may have on how to breed the rams. It's very similar to how I do the apistogrammas. The other thing is, same as the apistogramma, yes, some gravel in the bottom depending on which method you're using. From a botanicals point of view, as I've said before, all of my dwarfs that I'm trying to breed get Indian almond leaves in that aquarium. So that aquarium, you can see at the bottom, there's some Indian almond leaves. They don't like me putting my finger in front of them. And this aquarium at the bottom, you can see there's some decaying Indian almond leaves at the bottom of that as well. So from a botanical, Indian almond leaves is all I use. And I use it to help with the pH slightly, more importantly for the tannin in the water. And I use anywhere from 1 to 3 leaves, depending on the size of the aquarium or on the color that I'm trying to get. All right, so that's on the breeding. The equipment that I use for my TDS is this is the meter that I use for those that have asked. It's a COM 80. Okay, so that's the model, COM 80 from HM Digital. That's what I use for my TDS. And then for my pH, I use a pH pen from a company called Blue Lab. And that's what it looks like. So that's my pH pen. So from a project's point of view, the next big one that I'm working on at the moment, and it's taking a bit longer than I anticipated because life, is if you can imagine, it's a Betta rack with a difference, or an alternative Betta rack. And I call it a Betta rack because that's what it's primarily for. But if you can imagine having a bookshelf, a reasonably nice looking bookshelf with bigger containers on it, where the water is not centrally filtered, where each little container has its own little filter. In this case, it'll be sponge filters, where you're able to manipulate the water to keep different things in it, but all in one display. That's what I'm currently working on, and I think it's going to turn out to be a nice project, an interesting one. So if you want to see how that project turns out and what that looks like, this alternative Betta rack, hit the subscribe and the notification. The other one that I've been working on in the background, and I'll probably share that with you in the next few weeks, is what I've been doing is a Betta experiment. And what the experiment has been is that I had a tub that some Betta spawned in. It wasn't a big spawn, and in my previous Bettas videos, I mentioned about the fact that I could hardly see any babies in there, maybe only one. And there's probably 25, 30, I'm not too sure how many are actually eventually in that tub. But what I've done with that is I decided I'm just going to feed brine shrimp as I normally do. And then I'm going to move them over to their frozen food, and I'm going to continue feeding. And that's been going for a while now. And they're at a nice size where you can start seeing some decent coloring and everything on them. I haven't taken out any of those Bettas or had a look at them. And I'll be sharing that with you when I do it the first time. But the experiment was really around, could I raise Bettas to a certain size in the tub from the spawn to that size without doing any water changes, without adding any filtration, but starting off correctly. So I started off with a tub that was well matured, has plants, gets good lighting, and would that be adequate to get them to a certain stage? And I think it's worked really well. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with you and how I did that. Other than that, that's it from me. Have an awesome weekend to everybody. Stay safe. Look after yourselves. Enjoy the breeding. All success to you around whatever you're trying to breed. I hope it goes well. There's something that I've tried here, and you like the idea of it. Give it a go. Really, try it out. I'm looking forward to sharing some more of the projects with you and some more of the DIY stuff. Other than that, guys, take it easy. Urban Fish Keeper out.